Well, I was born 6 weeks before the war started, before the Germans invaded Poland. And we lived in Katowice, which is in the west, and my parents somehow were smart enough to run to the east, where my grandparents lived, also near Lwów, near Przemyśl. Everybody knows now where Przemyśl is, after the Ukrainian refugees came through Przemyśl. I personally don't remember things, but I know them because the people who helped the family during the war would come all the time after the war to our house, and they were constantly talking about it. And there were many Polish people who helped the family. Of the people who survived from my family, nobody was in the concentration camp. Nobody even went to the ghetto, except of my adopted sister, who is my cousin, and she was in the Przemyśl ghetto. She was a little girl. She turned, before yesterday, she turned 90. And the woman I was hidden in whose house I was hidden, she went to the ghetto and brought my cousin out. She was a tiny girl. She just wrapped her in some shawl and got her out. Her parents were killed. Her brother was killed. Whoever survived of the family that I know was helped by the Polish people and some Ukrainian people. When my parents came to the east, where my grandparents lived, and they had some land, and we stayed there until the Germans came closer to it was on the River San. My parents left me with a woman who was a daughter of my grandmother's housekeeper. And I have the picture of the woman because when I got married, I decided that she was my second mother and she has to meet my husband, so he went to Poland with me. And this is where I stayed. It was quite easy because we all spoke very good Polish without any Jewish accents. I was a blonde child with blue eyes, so this was my ciocia Józia, and my mother was supposedly her cousin. And it was, well, they were very poor people. It was near Przemyśl. They had a small house. He was a cobbler, or szewc. He was also an alcoholic. So every night he went to the bar and got drunk, but not enough to betray that he had Jews in his house, that he had a Jewish child in his house. Sometimes he even remembered to bring me a piece of cake. I didn't stay there all the time because once in a while we have to leave. They were afraid that people would come and betray them to the Germans. So there were some other families. There was a family of a professor from Poznań. He was a professor of the Polish language. And this is where my mother left me. I don't know how she found those people, really. But the husband didn't know about it. Their name was Wołyński. Mrs. Wołyński knew that I was Jewish. No, she didn't actually in the beginning until she found out from me. Because I was a little girl, you know, so I remembered my grandparents at that time. So one day she asked me, you know, when this is all over and you come with your mother and I will come and visit you, where would I stay? I say, well, you know, Grandma, you can stay in the Bożnica. Well, who had Bożnica, she knew immediately whom she was talking to. But she never told her husband, she never told her 2 daughters. I stayed there for a while. Then I came back to Ciocia Józia. Then some members of my family were staying with some Polish people in another villages, my uncle, my aunt. Actually, I have name of those people in the Ulma Museum. They have plaques over there. You know about the museum. And they have plaques for the people who are saving and helping Jews to survive. So I made sure that as many of them as possible have plaques. I went there to the opening. Well, if it wasn't for the Polish people, we really wouldn't have survived. Though somebody once must have noticed it and must have betrayed us, because my mother was there with me, with my Ciocia Józia, and the father was coming, and somebody told her that the Germans were looking for a Jewish woman with a child. It was obviously me and my mother. So they managed to ship me out to my aunt, who was staying with some Ukrainians, but my parents didn't have where to go, so they stayed. And there was a barn there, so they put them in the barn, put some, pieces of wood, made like a hiding place, put some straw on top of it. It was almost towards the end of the war. It was like 2 or 3 weeks before the war ended. Now, to mention Ciocia Józia and her husband, they were Methodists, and they were Volksdeutsch because their name was Klinger. And so when the Germans came, they usually, if somebody was in, they would close the barn from the inside, but they had brain enough not to do that. They closed it from the outside. The Germans came and said immediately to open the barn. So they did. One of them came. He jumped on this place where my parents were hidden. My parents never knew if he knew it was the end and didn't want to see them, because if he moved a little, he would fall in, or if he moved some straw, he would see them. But he went out, came out, and said there is nobody there. So at that moment, my uncle, Klinger, he spoke German. He says, well, was ich ein Volksdeutscher, ich würde die Juden halten. What, I, a Volksdeutscher, I would keep the Jews here. Started to yell. Ciocia tried to calm him down, and they left. The Germans left. So that was our miracle of survival. I think everybody who survived, it was a miracle in some way. I'm very happy that you are learning about those things. And I don't know if it's going to prevent it or anything, or everybody says so it would never happen again. It keeps happening over and over again. So let's just make sure that it doesn't happen too much. Okay?
Thank you so much. Is there anybody who would like to? Do you or the other 2 ladies have any possessions that survived the time of the Holocaust?
Our personal note, no.
Anybody else who have questions? No? Oh, yes.
How did you find yourself in America?
Oh, well, we stayed in Poland until 1960. And then my parents decided to emigrate. Most of the family left by then, so we are the only one left in Poland. And this is how we came here. We came on American quota. Do you know what quota is? The Americans had a certain number of people that they would let from different countries to the United States. And obviously, probably right after the war, my father applied for it. And then suddenly it came. So we left.
Okay, thank you so much.